I'm going to speak about things that are very unpopular in certain directions, in certain people. That is globalism, which many people think is a horrible idea. But it's not something that I'm proposing or recommending. It's something that I feel that is inevitable, is what I'm saying. Let me start out by saying that I believe that the American experiment has been a success. A rousing success, perhaps, but a success, and that is what is the American experiment. Back in 1776, and then when did they write the Constitution? 1789, was it? But that was the Bill of Rights in 1789. But the idea that the governance of the land, of all the people, should be ultimately the purview of the people themselves. And there is more than that. When the original Constitution was written, of course, and people gripe about this, it was written where only the white male landholders over 21 were actually the ones who made all the decisions as far as the people, which in itself was an expansion of the liberation of people, because before that you had to be something like aristocracy, born within certain families, to make decisions. Now that all you had to do was own a house and you were over 21 and you were a man, then you had the right to make decisions for what governed the people. And since that time, and very gradually, the concept that we the people, and that all men are created equal, and that we were all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights and all that, those concepts, which is the American experiment, became ingrained and grew within America, so that eventually you were allowed to vote even if you didn't own land. And then eventually, after a big fight, the black men were allowed to vote. And then eventually, after more than, 70 years after that, the women were allowed to vote. And then eventually, it was, even in my lifetime, 1972 or 73, I think it was, 18-year-olds were allowed to vote. So what has happened over the years with, two steps forward and one step back in America is that more and more larger numbers of classifications of people have gained the right to vote in what was the decisions about the government and where the government is going. Now, there's a lot of, the politics of the day. Certain corporations with money have influence upon the media, which has a lot of people turning their heads in one direction or another, so that, not all power is not equal to all people, but, there's groups of people who are easily swayed one way or another. But I believe, as a general rule, that the plurality of the citizens tend to vote for their own self-interest. And their own self-interest may not be other people's self-interest, but it becomes the plurality, and that's what you got to live with. This concept didn't just stay in America. It worked so well and it felt so good that it spread throughout the world. It went to France, and they had a revolution, and they chopped off all the aristocracy's heads, and it gradually moved into England with a gradual, and it was already happening in England because that's what founded America. But then it moved into the rest of Europe, and then it moved into all, Australia and Canada, and it moved, and it's been spreading very much throughout the world since then. But it is not the only system that exists. It's just a system that exists. And, that what seems to spread this is the culture. American culture has been fairly dominant over the last, say, 75 years and 100 years in the world. That we made movies and television and books and radio and all these things that were created in the Western democratic societies have spread throughout the world as a culture. And then there are other, like I say, there were other types of systems, like the Soviet Union existed for a while, and there was Mao Zedong and his Cultural Revolution in China, and South America with their petty dictators, and Africa, which is going through future shock because they're going from a agrarian society into a modern society in like 2 generations. There's a lot of people who don't have the American system or the democratic, system that we have here, and they still to this day do not have it. But what happened is the culture of America, the culture of the West, broke down some of these barriers, some of these systems, like the Soviet Union and China, I believe, were very much affected by the music of the West. I know this sounds like trivial to some people, but people in China and Russia at that time, in let's say 1970, they listened to their music, which was ordered by the state, and their art, which was ordered by the state, and it was dreary. Then all of a sudden on the radio, they start hearing, things like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and in China, Motown was very influential, the Supremes and the Four Tops and everything. And they listened to this music, and it turned their heads. Everybody was like working in their fields or whatever, and all of a sudden, "Baby love, my baby love," come out, and everybody starts dancing and listening. And in some parts of the world, I saw a report back before the Iron Curtain came down about the Russian young people trying to get their hands on American pop records and British pop records. It was like they were treasured because this was happy, And it dawned on a lot of the people, why are we putting out such dreary stuff? The culture preceded all of the political upheaval, both in China and Russia and other parts of the world. Culture spreads faster than it ever has before, and technology is increasing at a faster and faster pace even today. Even since I've been paying attention, the way that technology is spreading it hasn't really been integrated into the minds of people. That's why we get so much false information, because they see information from this general technology like the internet and the social medias and so forth, and they can't, they haven't been able to digest the fact that half of it is just bullshit. They haven't figured it out. That may come, but what else? The communication is expanding at an incredible rate right now worldwide, and you look at the ability to interpret other languages just through the computers. They're building machines now. I have it on my computer. Some fellow I know writes me from the Philippines on one of my social media sites, and I just click a button and it interprets it for me. Or they have things you can wear on your head now. I don't know how advanced they are, but they're going to become more advanced. So if you go to anywhere in the world, you just set the language. So, like I say, if you want to go to India or something and you got Hindi, let's say, and they speak that, then you just click a button. You speak into a little microphone. It has a little speaker that speaks out what you're saying in English and interprets it into Hindi. Then the guy listening to you says something back to you, and it hears it through your microphone and speaks into your ear what he says back. And it happens like almost instantaneously, or almost instantaneously. That's something that's breaking down barriers as far as language, and it's coming more and more predominant in the future. Well, the other thing is that the concept of capitalism and businesses have gone to a worldwide culture. We used to have the mercantilism in England and so forth, and other European countries, which they colonized the third world, and they took advantage of the people in those countries by taking away their natural resources, their chocolate and their sugar and their tin and their copper and so forth, and diamonds and gold that they could find. And they took it all back to Europe, and they manufactured things in Europe, and the people in those countries weren't given a real fair deal at that time. But it was all mercantilism was meant to benefit the mother country that originally set up those colonies, and they didn't care about the other people. They didn't consider those other people as people. Well, things have changed since then, I hope. I think it has anyway. The people in other countries now are buying into the whole capitalist system, including China, which is amazing. So the capitalism spreads outward always. It has to grow. That's the nature of capitalism. It grows, and it spreads out throughout the entire world, and everybody wants to feed their family. Everybody wants the best deal they possibly can get, which is what capitalism is about, getting your best deal. And so capitalism has pretty much become international. There's international corporations now throughout the entire world, and no place practically, maybe North Korea or something, but hardly any place has been able to escape international corporations, and they're going worldwide and global, and it's encompassed the entire world. Apple Computers makes a lot of their stuff in China and Vietnam. We were fighting Vietnam about communism a few years ago, and now they're making clothes for people to sell at Walmart, and then what I see in the future is that now that capitalism and corporations have gone international, and culture seems to be going international. Those X-Men video movies go worldwide and so forth. The next thing that will follow, I think, will be governance and so forth. Now this is where we're going to run into, I think it's going to happen in stages, and this is going to be we're going to have to be very careful about how this all goes. Even though I don't think we can control it, but there is a tendency for the top to go downward instead of the bottom to go upward with regard to decision making. So as these corporations go international, they're controlled a lot out of the United States, I'm sure, which has a tradition of democracy. But there is no tradition of democracy in China. So they have these corporations which are absolutely top down, And what I'm saying, of course, is this is going to happen in stages, this globalism. There's going to be certain power areas that congeal, which I believe is going to be like the English-speaking world will be one. They will all congeal into one confederacy. And then, of course, European has already pretty much congealed into one confederacy. Then, Asia, China and all that, they want to influence. They're also being very influential in Africa right now, too. But I think their political system is going to congeal there. There's going to be probably 3-4 major power centers. Maybe Latin America will congeal it. That would be a great benefit. I'm just guessing on this. If all of Central America was one country, I think they would do a lot better. For example, But that's the stage that's going to happen. Now, at that stage, it's going to be dangerous because they're going to bump into each other, and they're going to possibly have armed conflict against each other. And, anytime we enter into armed conflict at that large of a scale, there is a danger that some fanatics will destroy the earth and all living things upon it with their nuclear weapons. That's a real possibility, okay? But what I'm also talking about is in this movement, and it could, I'm thinking that this whole thing that I'm talking about may take 200 years, you think, or 100 years, but the way things go nowadays, things go at faster and faster rate. This could be 50 years before all this, 20 years even before all this happens. I mean, I imagine 30 years would be a better guess, but what we have to watch out for also is what's the tendency toward racism and fascism and that kind of thing, because that would bring about wars. There's certain individuals in our society and other societies who believe my race is the only real human race or something, and they're going to discount anybody that isn't that race, and that's a danger that could develop. What we have to do, though, is we have to realize that war is an evil unto itself. We need to learn how to make this transaction into the future, and transition into the future is what I want to say. We need to make it peacefully. That otherwise we could be doomed as a species.